Okay, I want you to imagine our planet as this vast, living library. Instead of books, its shelves are just packed with millions of unique species. Each one is its own incredible story, a story of evolution written over millennia. But here's the thing. This library is in serious trouble. Its pages are being ripped out, and they're disappearing faster than we can even read them. This is the story of biodiversity and the fight to save what's left.
So that brings us to a pretty heavy question that scientists are grappling with. Are we, right now, living through a mass extinction? I mean, we know from the fossil record that the Earth has had 5 of these before. We're talking colossal, planet-wide die-offs, triggered by things like asteroid impacts or just massive volcanic eruptions.
But this one feels different. In fact, a lot of scientists believe we're in the middle of what they call the 6th extinction. And what makes this one totally unique is its cause. It's not a volcano, it's not an asteroid, it's us. It is the first mass extinction event in the entire 4.5 billion year history of Earth to be driven by a single species.
All right, so if we're the cause, how exactly are we doing it? Let's take a look at humanity's heavy footprint. The main ways our activities are pushing just countless species right to the brink.
And it really comes down to this. When you boil it all down, the number one single greatest threat to wildlife all across the globe is simply the loss of its home, habitat destruction. It accounts for the majority of species loss, period. Think about it. If an animal has nowhere to live, nowhere to eat, nowhere to raise its young, it just can't survive.
And to really get a sense of the stakes here, just look at this magnificent tiger. Its home, the tropical rainforest, is what we call a global biodiversity hotspot. Now get this. These forests cover a tiny fraction of the Earth, only about 7%, but they are home to a staggering 3/4 of all known species on the planet. So when we lose these forests, we're not just losing trees, we are losing the richest, most vibrant chapters in our planet's entire living library.
And the pressure, man, it comes from all sides. It's not just one thing. We're clearing massive forests for farmland. We're damming up rivers, which completely changes the ecosystems downstream. We're mining, destroying coral reefs in the process. We're draining wetlands for development. And then we're polluting whatever is left with industrial waste and pesticides. It is a full-on, multi-front assault on the natural world.
And as if habitat loss wasn't enough, we've got these other huge threats breathing down their necks. Overexploitation, that's hunting, fishing, poaching, is massive. The global wildlife market is a $10 billion a year industry. Then you've got invasive species, animals and plants we move around that just completely wreck the local ecosystem. And of course the big one, climate change, which is changing the fundamental rules of life all over the planet.
Now, if you're thinking, well, if a species is really, really numerous, it's probably safe. I need to tell you the story of the passenger pigeon. Not that long ago, this was probably the most abundant bird on the entire planet. Not just in North America, the entire planet.
How abundant are we talking? Just try to wrap your head around this. A single flock could be 400 kilometers long and contain upwards of 2 billion birds. People said it would take hours for a flock to pass overhead, literally blocking out the sun. Tree branches would just snap under their collective weight. It's a number it's almost impossible for our brains to even process.
And yet, because of relentless hunting for cheap meat, their population just completely collapsed. By 1914, the very last passenger pigeon, a female named Martha, died alone in a zoo. In just a handful of decades, a species of billions was totally, completely wiped off the face of the Earth. It is the ultimate cautionary tale that incredible abundance is absolutely no shield against extinction.
Okay, so that's the problem. And it is a huge, daunting problem. But it's not the end of the story, because humanity is fighting back. The effort to save species is basically being fought on 2 main fronts.
And these 2 strategies are called in situ and ex situ conservation. In situ just means on site. This is what you want to do. It's about protecting a species right where it lives, in its natural home. Using our library analogy, this is like saving the entire library building and all the books inside. Then you have ex situ, which means off-site. This is the emergency plan, taking a species out of its home to protect it under human care, like in a zoo. It's a last resort, but it's like grabbing a few priceless pages as the library is burning down.
So let's start with the primary battleground, in situ conservation. This is where the most important work happens, because you're not just saving one animal, you're saving the entire web of life that it needs to survive.
So, how do you actually design one of these protected areas so that it works? Well, modern conservationists use this really smart strategy.
At the very center, you have the core reserve. This is pristine, untouched habitat. No humans allowed, no disturbance. Then, wrapped around that, you have a buffer zone. Here, some limited sustainable human activity is okay, like ecotourism or some farming. This gives jobs to local people, which gives them a real reason to protect the core. And finally, and this is key, you build corridors that connect different reserves. This lets animals move back and forth, which is absolutely vital for keeping the gene pool healthy.
This deep concern for wildlife, put so perfectly here by the legendary hunter-turned-conservationist Jim Corbett, well, it ended up fueling one of the most famous on-site conservation efforts in the world. And he was talking, of course, about the tiger.
See, back in 1973, India's tiger population was in free fall, so they launched something called Project Tiger. It started with just 9 reserves, but by using that core buffer corridor strategy, the project has now grown to 27 reserves. And the results? Just look at that. The tiger population has bounced back to nearly 3,000. It is a stunning example that smart, well-managed on-site conservation really can work.
But what happens when a species' home is already gone, or it's so dangerous that it just can't survive in the wild anymore? Well, that's when we have to turn to the backup plan, the high-tech lifeboats of ex situ conservation.
And this is where the science gets really wild. We're talking about way more than just your old-fashioned zoo. Today, we have these incredibly sophisticated captive breeding programs, artificial insemination, embryo transfers, even somatic cell cloning. That's basically making a genetic copy to preserve a species. And for plants, we have things like seed banks. These really are the last line of defense to keep a species from just blinking out of existence forever.
A seed bank is one of the coolest ex situ tools we have for plants. The best way to think about it is genetic insurance. By freezing seeds from thousands and thousands of different plant species, we can basically lock in their genetic diversity for decades, maybe even centuries. It's a way to protect them from some future catastrophe.
And if you're wondering why this genetic insurance is so important, here is the perfect story. A while back, scientists in Mexico stumbled on this tiny little patch of a wild species of corn. It turns out this wild corn is a perennial, meaning it grows back every year, and it's naturally resistant to a bunch of diseases that kill our normal crops. And here's the crazy part. They found it right before its one and only habitat was about to be bulldozed. Thanks to off-site conservation, we saved that genetic code, and now it's being used to make our own food crops stronger. We almost lost something priceless before we even knew we had it.
Now, the whole point of these lifeboat programs is to eventually reintroduce the species back into the wild. And there have been some absolutely incredible success stories. The Arabian oryx and the California condor both were declared extinct in the wild. They only existed in captivity. The black-footed ferret was down to just six individuals left on Earth. But thanks to these heroic breeding programs, all of them have been successfully brought back and reintroduced to their native homes. It's just proof that we can pull a species back from the very, very edge.
So the big takeaway here is that this isn't an either-or choice. It can't be. The fight to save biodiversity is a two-front war. You have to fight it out there in the wild, protecting habitats, and you have to fight it in the lab, developing these amazing techniques that act as our last line of defense. You need both. Both are absolutely essential.
And why does all this matter so much? I think this quote just nails it. Every single time a species disappears, our planet gets a little bit smaller, a little bit poorer. We lose potential new medicines, we lose genetic resilience, we lose a piece of our world's story. We are, quite literally, limiting the choices and the options for every generation that comes after us. You know, we started this with the idea of Earth as a living library. Its story is still being written, and right now, we are the ones holding the pen. So the question we're left with is a really profound one. With so many volumes, so many incredible stories on the verge of disappearing forever, which ones will we choose to save? And what will those choices say about us?